Hey, for those who don't know me, my name is Trevor Grant. I'm the founder and chief cheerleader of Revenue Hub, and I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining in to day 2 of this 2-day event titled Revenue Management Technology, Leadership and Data Science. Today is focused on the future of revenue management, and we have some wonderful speakers joining us from Libra, Atomize, Beyond Price, Pace Revenue, and Ideas. Before I welcome the panel, we do have a last-minute change to the lineup that you might have seen in any of the event invitations. Unfortunately, Fulvio Giannetti, the CEO of Libra, has had to step out today and has been replaced by Eric Munoz. Fulvio has been laid low following a second COVID vaccine jab, but the good news is he's now fully vaccinated. And thanks to new UK regulations, he can come and visit us if he wants to. Anyway, I'd like to thank all 5 of our speakers for joining us today. And I'd like to invite each of you to introduce yourself. That would be really appreciated. And I guess as Libra have put together this event, it seems courteous to start with Eric first. Eric, if I can pass over to you, please.
Thanks, Trevor. Hopefully it's not too much of a downgrade from Fulvio Giannetti, who's our CEO, to me. Fulvio and I work very closely together, as you might expect. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at Libra. Fulvio is CEO. But Fulvio and I actually used to work together at a company in Paris called Price Match, which was a revenue management software company which was acquired by Booking.com. So Fulvio and I go back in terms of other revenue management software companies, and we're working together again today with Libra. So I'm saying that to give you some background in terms of our experience working together in the past, and obviously we work very closely together today. So my role here today is to represent Libra and Fulvio as best I can. My personal perspective is from a hotelier's background and then a hotel tech background. And when I say hotel tech, I really literally mean every bit of hotel tech you can imagine. So PMS, CRS, RMS, obviously, point of sale, spa, etc., etc., etc. So I will have trouble sticking to the 2-minute limit if I have a time limit, but that's okay. I'm practicing trying to speak more briefly whenever I have the chance to. But thank you. Nice to be here today.
Super. Thank you very much. And let's kind of follow through in maybe company alphabetical order to make it easier. So Alexander of Atomize, if I can pass over to you, please.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Alexander Edström. I'm the CEO of Atomize. Been CEO for Atomize since 2016, since inception. And today I'm broadcasting from our new office in Gothenburg, Sweden. So I think that's enough for me for now, and hand over to the next person.
Perfect, thank you. So let's go to Neville at Beyond Price.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm broadcasting to you from Madrid, where it's 35 degrees outside, just to make you feel a bit jealous. I'm a hotelier. I've worked my whole career in hotels. I started off as a waiter back in 1992. And I kind of got the revenue management bug around about 2001, when I was a general manager of a hotel in London. And I've basically been working in revenue management area ever since. I worked for a large multinational in Spain. And then 4 years ago, I took the leap over to the other side and started working for Beyond Price. My ex-colleagues would say I took a leap over to the dark side. And Beyond Price is a Spanish company which provides RMS technology for hotels. So I look at it from a hotelier's perspective. I'm in charge of experience, which means everything that happens post-sale, although actually I am involved a little bit in product development and some pre-sale things as well. And as I say, it's a great pleasure to be here today, and I'm looking forward to the conversations.
Thank you, Neville. Really appreciate it. And Klaus of Ideas, if I could pass over to you, please.
Yeah, keeping up with the geographic locations. I'm based in Minneapolis. I'm Klaus, and I almost have as fun a title as some of the other folks here, especially chief cheerleader. I'm kind of the chief cheerleader for the company. So I have two titles. One is chief evangelist, which I've had for the last 4 years, which is about understanding the big themes for the next 5 to 7 years, and then bringing those themes to the industry through speaking engagements like this. And then also bringing these themes internally into the company, which will then in turn drive our strategy, our roadmap, our positioning, and the way we communicate back to the industry. I'm also the Chief Development Officer, which means that I am in charge of the longer term strategy of ideas together with a couple people underneath me. I run the partner team, which looks at integrations with all of our growing technology partnership ecosystem. And I also look at M&A activity and just general growth opportunities. So I go from the very, very broad perspective of what's going to happen in the next 5 to 7 years to actually bringing some of that to life through strategy and through our partnerships that we have with technology companies around the world. And then with our various product and marketing and sales teams. So very excited to be here. I've been in the hotel industry since I was 15 when I went to hotel school and worked for IHG for many, many years around the world. I kind of dropped into revenue management when I was based in New York and then in Paris. And then I ran revenue management and pricing for IHG for Asia Pacific for a number of years before joining IDEAS.
Super. Thank you, Klaus. And over to Jens at Pace Revenue, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm calling in from Sweden today. So I'm the CEO of Pace Revenue. My background and why I'm here today is we were founded in 2017. So we've been going for about 4 or 5 years now. We've done a lot in that time. My personal background is in building companies. So there's really been 3 waves to my career. The first one at Google, where I launched Google Shopping. So I was in the shopping space, retail space, launched Google Shopping and local shopping across Europe. The second space was in payments and point of sale, where I was a member of the founding team at a company called iZettle, which raised a ton of money and over a period of 7 years built up the competitor to Square, which some of you have come across, the US company led by Jack Dorsey. So that we took from effectively a founding in 2008 to an exit to PayPal in a period of 7-8 years. And now revenue management, which I've been in for the period of time which we've been building Pace. And very quickly, our mission is to accelerate innovation and data-driven thinking in the revenue management space. So we're pushing the message or tagline of revenue revolution. And the quick pitch is basically less hornswaggle and more results in revenue management. And hopefully we'll talk more about that. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Super. Thanks, Jens. So the format of this event is we have 3 broad areas to touch on. The first will focus on what the future of revenue management might look like. The second will aim to explore what might be holding back the adoption of RM technology. The third and final topic will dig into how technology can support the increasing spectrum of KPIs. It's going to hopefully be a pretty fluid conversation, but more importantly, hopefully it's going to be engaging for those that are watching and informative. We'll start each session with a broad question. Each of our speakers will give their initial answer and we'll then move into a discussion based around the responses and follow-up questions. If you're watching and you want to comment or you want to ask a question, please feel free to engage. We've got people in the back end watching the questions and we can feed those through to our moderator who is going to guide us through. And I'd like to personally thank him for coming on board and helping us through this moderation. And that's Christian Berger. So enough from me. Let me hand over to Christian. Christian, if you can introduce yourself and then lead us forward into the discussion, that would be great.
Thank you, Trevor, Revenue Hub and Libra for inviting me to moderate today's event. And a very warm welcome, of course, to our global audience. I consider myself fortunate to be working in hospitality for the past 24 years. 15 of those amazing years, I was able to make an impact on all things revenue, taking me across the globe and collaborating with some of the industry's brightest minds, 6 of which I have the honor to be with here today. alongside my day job as Vice President of Revenue Strategy at Oxford Collection Hotels in Bend, Oregon. I've been heavily involved in advancing the revenue discipline as a member and past chairman of HSMAI's Revenue Optimization Advisory Board. So with that said, let's get this show on the road. First section, the future of revenue management. In keeping with our overall topic of insanity in revenue management, I tend to believe that despite of all the pain and suffering, 2020 has been a catalyst to push hospitality and hospitality tech professionals to look at things differently. So to the first question, what will the future of revenue management immediately post-COVID and 5 to 10 years from now look like? So I'm going to ask Klaus to give us his 2-minute view from the top first.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Good to see you again. Obviously, the world's been kind of going through a very, very difficult period since you and I got stuck in New Zealand last year during the lockdown. So I'm really, really happy to see that many revenue management system providers being on this panel. That means that the industry is kind of somewhat healthy and revenue management is still alive. So incredibly difficult period for all of us, but especially for the hotel industry, obviously. And I know usually during these panels, there's a lot of people on the call that have been furloughed or have been let go and are looking for a job. I'm incredibly optimistic about revenue management. Actually, over the last 12 months, the amount of new revenue management system installations and revenue management adoption has actually increased dramatically across the industry. So I think this has really been a catalyst for the industry to understand that technology in general, but especially revenue management technology, is absolutely critical to deal with the higher uncertainty and the more dynamic market conditions that the industry is faced with. And yes, demand is very low in a lot of parts of the world, and it's just very, very slowly coming back. But at the same time, that means uncertainty is increasing, then the amount of questions that are being asked is increasing, and the amount of stakeholders that are looking for questions to be asked very quickly and decisions to be made very quickly is increasing dramatically. So how will it look in the immediate terms? I'm very, very optimistic about revenue management. We see a drive towards profit optimization. We see a drive towards more automation. We see a drive towards managing and optimizing multiple revenue streams, not just room revenue, in the immediate future. And we see that done through automation and centralization of teams, not just at the hotel level, but at the corporate level. For the next 5 to 10 years, which I'm very passionate about, I'm equally optimistic. And I think we're going to see a huge amount of work being done over the next couple of years. In 5 years, I predict we will have attribute-based pricing in place for a large number of the industry, driven by the big chains. We will have total revenue management in place. And most importantly, we'll have the emergence and we'll have actually in place commercial platforms that will allow the commercial leaders to optimize not just room revenue, but optimize all revenue streams, make their marketing smarter, make their sales approaches smarter, make their loyalty programs smarter, and make their distribution smarter. So we're moving from a let's optimize revenue and room revenue to a let's optimize all the commercial levers that a commercial leader, the chief revenue officer, chief commercial officer, chief marketing officer need. Let's make those tools smarter and let's infuse them with the same amount of analytics and science as we have today in revenue management.
Thank you, Klaus. Much appreciated. Alexander, if you want to give us your kind of view from the top as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I share Klaus's sort of vision here, and I'm also very much an optimist about where we're going and where we're heading right now. But for sure, I mean, without no doubt, I mean, the pandemic has triggered sort of forced hotels. We can see this to assess organizational structures and change to become more streamlined. I think that also the fact that it has called for a more lean approach for revenue management. That is something I think will be something going not only now but also in the future for 5 to 10 years ahead with more sophisticated algorithms and more as we learn more and we are able to educate the market about revenue management. We are able to not only to go deeper, as Klaus said, from total sort of room revenue to total revenue management, but also actually to total profit management. That's sort of what we envision in the next 5 to 10 years. But also what's important here, obviously, is the fact that we need to educate the market, and there are still so few adopting RMS methodology to the best practice. So we have a lot of work to do here in this community, and that's why I'm so happy to be a part of this call, because this is part of this as well, to educate the market that revenue management is nothing you need to fear, really. It's something that will support, is there to support the hotel's future. And I think we have come quite far already, even if we have a lot more work to do in the near and long-term future.
Thanks, Alexander. I couldn't agree more about the long road ahead, as you usually say. Neville, do you want to give us your perspective?
Sure. I think here there's a lot of talk about the pandemic changing the game and everything being different from now on. And I'm not so much a follower of that school of thought. But what I do think is that the situation that we've been living through for the past year and a half has really accelerated trends which were already happening within the sector, but people have started to really give more importance to certain things. And one of these would be revenue management. And although we're all representing revenue management systems and technology, I think we have to bear in mind that there are vast swathes of the industry who didn't really do revenue management in any structured way. So I agree with what Alexander said about learning and culture. I think people have seen the need to actually take revenue management seriously as a result of the pandemic. And this means that they need to have people on their team who can analyze numbers and produce conclusions, because the behavior of our business is very unpredictable, and we need to be able to pull data and understand this data and take decisions based on this data. And obviously their technology can help, but you also need a person who understands this. And this was actually touched upon yesterday in yesterday's discussion as well. So I think in the short term, I think people are realizing that they need to pay attention to revenue management and take it seriously. We're also seeing, again, an acceleration of a trend towards digital transformation within the industry. We're not typically an industry of early adopters of technology, and I think that's because of the fragmentation in terms of ownership across different markets. But I think people are really realizing now that technology can support them and help them in making decisions. So I think in the short term, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see an increased interest in revenue management, in analysis and being able to understand business behavior more quickly. And this should lead, I think, to an uptake in the amount of adoption of technologies that can help in this case. In the mid to long term, I agree with Klaus. Again, this is just an acceleration, but total revenue management, we've been talking about it for 10 years and no one's doing it, or it's not widespread yet. So I think we're going to move towards that, definitely. I think we're going to move also towards discipline convergence. And what I mean by that is that the role of a revenue manager is going to become less and less about taking tactical decisions, because the tactical decisions can be taken by software, by your revenue management technology, which frees the revenue manager up to be a strategist and really think about what is in the long-term interests of my business and how can I maximize the profits of my business in the long term. This obviously means taking care of all revenue streams. It also means taking decisions based on the revenue contribution of different channels. which is something we've also been talking about for a long time, net ADR. But I think within 5-10 years, we're going to be there. And our revenue management is going to be a more strategic role. The silos between marketing and sales and distribution and revenue management are going to disappear. And I think technology is key to supporting this evolution of the role. So that's where I think we're going. And again, I agree completely with Klaus and Alexander. I'm very optimistic about the future in this sense.
Thank you, Neville. And I really appreciate you bringing up the human element here as well, talking about the people behind, and what will happen to them and how they have to fit in. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. But before we do that, I'm going to pass it over to Jens to give us his view.
Thank you, Christian. I think a lot about hospitality and revenue management from the perspective of how does this discipline and industry compare to other similar industries and disciplines, and how does hospitality compare? And I think it's interesting and telling to compare hospitality and revenue management to, for example, retail. It's interesting to compare it to other industries, but let's just start with retail, which is a roughly 3 times larger industry. So in the region of 4 to 5 trillion, hospitality is 1.7 trillion, or double that if you include corporate travel. Now, what are the differences? In retail, you have a ton of companies in excess of 10, 50 billion market cap or valuation. And those are technology companies which are giving e-commerce or retailers services to help them compete against the likes of Amazon. 2 examples: Shopify, a small company 10 years ago, now 185 billion in market cap. Shopify, similar valuation or larger. And what do we have in hospitality? Well, we have the large OTAs, similar to Amazon. But if we look at the technology vendors and companies we have supplying hotels and operators with the tech they need to compete and stay relevant, the largest companies we have in this space, comparing to hundreds of billion size companies in retail, are here: Sabre, 4 billion market cap; Oracle Hospitality in the region of 2-3 billion; Ideas, roughly the same size, and that's a private company and not listed. So that's educated guesswork. But I think really what we should have in hospitality, if we were at the same level of maturity, are double gangers to those very sophisticated companies in retail. So what I think a lot about, and what I talk to lots of operators in hospitality, C-level folks about, is like, what is wrong with hospitality today, and what does the future need to bring? And I think there are 3 core components here for revenue management. So I'm just going to focus on people and mission, and not so much on how we get there or what the tech is. But we need to be more clear that revenue management drives incremental business impact. It's not a cost center, it's a profit center, and is able to generate additional revenue. And being able to quantify that and show that so that we can get the investment associated with a profit center, not a cost center. So that's number 1. Number 2 is working cross-functionally across the entire organization to drive, as we said, total revenue, and deeper down also drive profit or margin metrics. Again, cross-functional is the key word there. And number 3, positioning revenue management as the owner of strategy and data within the organizations. Now, I think if we do those 3 things well over the next 5 to 10 years, we have a great future ahead of us for revenue management. We will have hundreds of thousands of employees. We'll be adding hundreds of billion of value, incremental quantifiable value to this industry. And if we don't, we will have tens of thousands of revenue managers disgruntled, doing administrative, manual, repetitive tasks, and their jobs will gradually be eaten up by automation and technology. So I think there's very clear paths here of where revenue management can go, and it's in our power within this industry to take one or the other. And I think we need to come together and really raise the stakes in the industry and how we talk and think about revenue management.
You're on mute there, Christian.
There we go. Happens to the best. Thank you, Jens. And I really like that concept of transformation that you kind of alluded to. So our last panelist to give his 2 minutes on this particular topic will be Eric. Eric, if I can pass it over to you.
Thanks, Christian. I agree mostly with everything that's been said so far. I'm not going to speak about what I don't disagree with, what I don't agree with, but I absolutely see a positive immediate future. Even if we just consider the pandemic that we are in or emerging from, or we've been living for the last 18 months, almost every hotel around the world, either the GM or the owner, will be asking the operations or commercial team or the revenue manager, when will business come back? When do you think things will return? This question, expressed a number of different ways, will be asked over and over again. So the importance of understanding demand or understanding the drivers for demand are more than just, well, the government said this, but now the government said that. The traffic light is green, now it's orange. So let's say the importance of understanding demand and the drivers of demand have been, even though it's a negative connotation with this pandemic, it's been reinforced. So we've had, let's say, a lot of adoption with our particular RMS, which is replacing some RMSs in some cases, but the majority of cases, it's the hotel's first RMS. We're replacing spreadsheets or the first step towards automating RMS. So I see that continuing, but I'd like to focus more on 5 to 10 years. I always think in terms of, let's say, what is going to happen, pretty surely will happen. Whether it's 10 years or 8 years or even 5 years, that can be debated. But what I absolutely see happen is really in a parallel or similar to what Jens spoke about just now, and that is specifically consolidation in the supplier tech side. So Libra, if you're not aware, is part of the Zucchetti group of companies. So Zucchetti are one of the largest privately owned software companies in Europe. Zucchetti have formed a division called Zucchetti Hospitality, which we have approximately 35,000 hotel customers within that division. So Zucchetti have got 5 or 6 different PMS companies that have been acquired over the years, 5 or 6 different booking engine channel manager CRSs collectively, 2 RMSs, where one, Rateboard is the other one, point of sale systems, HR systems, accounting systems, which also serve hospitality. So Zucchetti Hospitality are absolutely one of those companies strategically, carefully acquiring product companies. Sometimes it's a brand new product category. Other times it's augmenting or adding to an existing product category. Now, we're not alone in this space. There are companies in Canada, in North America, several, who are VC or private equity based, who are making different decisions and different acquisitions. And we've seen those small steps occurring over the last several years. So that'll absolutely continue to happen. And the end game, which I'd love to talk about in more detail, will be that we'll have, let's say, 8 major suppliers of hotel tech, but it'll be one sort of solution. It'll be like the retail sector has ERP, hospitality will have HMS, hotel management system. Well, what's inside the hotel management system? Well, what's your business? What do you need? Well, we need reservations, we need a website, we need pricing. Okay, tick, tick, tick. All those features will be enabled as part of the HMS in the same way that in retail, they've got a checklist of functionality of what you require from your ERP. That's all.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. And everybody's opinion really on this particular question. Now, one of the themes that I think took from this first question as a consolidation of your feedback, I've heard automation, I've heard convergence. I think something that we've seen before, how disciplines converge. I think, Klaus, you made definitely a valid point in regards to the commercial aspect of the role of revenue management and kind of expanding on that one moving forward. I think, Neville, you talked, and I mentioned this, I like that a lot, the human component, culture and education being the foundation really for revenue management professionals to wrap their mind around, where are we headed, what needs to be done, what needs to change. And I think when Jens spoke about technology overall and tech in hospitality and comparing that to retail, one of the senses I got is that sometimes hospitality may be more of a follower as opposed to really somebody who is, or like an industry that is leading us and pushing hard and heavy in that same direction. So a question I would have for all of you first as a follow-up to your comments is, how do we get there? What are some of the key obstacles that we have to overcome? And in particular, as it relates to comments that you have made now, as it relates to the adoption of total revenue management, breaking up of silos, that commercial role, which I think, again, Neville mentioned, we've been talking about forever. So what needs to happen? And even if we look at 2020 as the catalyst, how can we actually get to those results? I mean, what are some of the obstacles? I'm just going to put this out to the group.
I can start there, Christian, if I may.
Perfect.
I think what we are facing right now is there's a big change happening, and what's different now compared to, I guess, 5 to 10 years ago is that the market has started to vote with their feet, where they're in terms of what they want to have in terms of providers today are much better when it comes to PMSs and CRM systems and everything, much better to promote themselves and also describe what they are doing, and that has offered the hotels to be able to choose from a more broader selection of vendors. And in such an environment where you have a market that is moving in one direction, which I mean by voting with their feet, that will accelerate the adoption of technology in general, which was not the case 5 to 10 years ago. Then if you had a PMS, for instance, we start there, which then ties into the fragmented, how the fragmented the market is. That is, in my view, accelerating quite fast now, and that's going to accelerate even further. So if you put it this way, as long as you don't have a market that is not willing to move, the change will be slow. But that, I think, is changing at the moment.
Yeah, I think, can I continue or follow on from what Alexander said? So I agree completely, but I'd like to take it a step further. So yes, there are new suppliers, or let's say legacy suppliers, in lots of different product categories who each speak to the hotelier, right? So whether the hotelier, we can say, is basic, not very experienced, or a bit more advanced, regardless of the level of experience of the hotelier, let's just talk about 3 product categories: the RMS supplier, the PMS supplier, and then let's say CRS supplier, and we include channel managers in CRS. These 3 suppliers each have their sales pitch, their product, their presentation to do. I know this because I've done this. I've worn those hats. I had those PowerPoint presentations. Anyway, unfortunately for the hotelier, each of these product suppliers tend to have one slide where they've got circles with different product categories and their product in the middle. So the RMS is in the middle, and then you have a PMS here, guest there, channel over there, accounting here. Then they speak to another supplier from CRS. The CRS is in the middle. All the other systems are around. And every single supplier tends to present their solution from their centralized position. Obviously, they want to be quote unquote sticky. They want to be the system that absolutely is required to make everything else function. So is it any wonder that hoteliers over the years, I'm talking about many years, would be confused about the optimum way of deploying technology when every supplier tends to speak in a similar way, but from a different point of view with different arrows and boxes? So education is required, yes, but as an industry, we need to be a lot better at educating the hotelier in a consistent way, not just from a self-serving way.
Thanks, Eric. And just to kind of, from my perspective as a hotelier, what I've kind of took from your comments just now is, if you look at any system, PMS, CRS, RMS, as the center of the universe, and everybody else is sort of, surrounding this as kind of like, we have the best tool, we have the best platform, but they're not realizing, okay, guys, you gotta have to play well in the sandbox with other legacy products and whatever else, and because otherwise, where are we gonna go from there? So I think that's a very, very valid point, and I think in our second section we talk about a little bit more about the technology specifically and some of those obstacles. I'd like to kind of go back a little bit more to the path, the future path of revenue management, and maybe something that most of you guys have actually mentioned, and that is that human component. As you, Alexander, I think you put it as in, voting with your feet. There's movement now. There is almost this kind of sense of urgency. Oh my God, we've got to do something. Let's get a revenue management system, because I heard that is important, because it can get us somewhere. What do you feel technology providers such as yourselves have to do in order for people to not only kind of, okay, sign the contract, pay the money, get the installation, but also understand how to utilize those, so that we don't run the risk of setting our people up as those individuals who don't necessarily understand what is required of them, and then eventually they become redundant, and then at some point you'll have a whole bunch of revenue professionals on the market, because of the advancement of automation and such.
So is your question about automation, or is your question about how to install the trust and the confidence? Sorry, if you could just clarify.
The trust, it's the human part, Klaus. It's the human part. How can I get the people not only to kind of look at the technology, but also how can we help them to embrace it, understand it, and fully integrate it into the culture?
I think Neville had his hand up, so I'll let him go first.
Thanks, Klaus. I think we have a big responsibility here. If we want to sell products to hotels, we have to make sure that the hotels or the hotel companies can know what to do with it, basically. And hotel companies are at different levels of knowledge and sophistication in terms of revenue management. So they don't all need the same tool, for example. And actually, in some cases, my salespeople hate me, but sometimes we talk to people and I say that I don't think that they're ready for an RMS at the particular point that they are. So I think we have an obligation to educate people. And it's in our interest, because if we want to sell our product, people need to know what to do with it. There is a counter argument that says you need to make your product easier to use. And I actually also agree with that. We need to do both things. We need to educate on one side, and we need to make our product as user-friendly as possible. But normally, you still need a person at hotel level who is capable of interpreting the information and the recommendations and the forecast that you're giving. I think we need to help. And I think education is extremely important, because there isn't a revenue management culture in all hotels, in all markets. There just isn't. Regardless of what we might like it to be, that's not really the case. So I think we have a responsibility here. In my department, we have an area called Beyond Price Academy, which is training about revenue management. It's not training about how to use our solution. It's just training in concepts of revenue management. And I'm sure many of the other people on this panel have similar things. But we need to get over this cultural barrier, because if not, you're going to give them something to someone and they're not going to use it properly, and they're going to be disappointed. And that doesn't help adoption, obviously. And I think we also need to make sure that we can show people the value that a revenue management system is adding to their business. And we need metrics for that. And it's not easy. how do you demonstrate that the improvement in a business is due to the software that you're providing? It's not easy to do that. Do you measure it in market share? In the discussion yesterday, there was some talk about simulation, comparing what the system would do with what a revenue manager would have done. I still think there's some work to do here to get over this level of, I wouldn't exactly say mistrust. People need to be convinced that if they're going to invest in technology, it's going to improve their business. And I think we have a responsibility to show people. So for one side, education, and for the other side, demonstrating that we're adding value. I think that's really important.
Thanks, Neville. I think Jens had also something to say here.
Yes, I think we are focusing on the technology space, which maybe makes sense since we all come from that space. But I think at its core, we don't have a technology challenge. We have an industry and a cultural challenge. We have an industry where the majority of revenue management teams don't have enough investment, don't have a strategic seat at the table, aren't able to prove that they're generating incremental revenue, or aren't seen as generating incremental revenue. All of which I think has led to a fatigue in the industry. And I think that's the core challenge for us as revenue management folks to work out. We need to have teams in situ on the operational side who are empowered to take strategic decisions, who are empowered to get the investment into the tools that they need and the platforms they need, and who have a clear mission that they're executing on. I think before we get that in place, the technology piece will remain an afterthought. And I think that's why in this industry, we are investing roughly 1/3 of what other industries invest. So I think the way we look at the numbers, roughly 0.5% of the turnover in hospitality is invested into tech. In other industries, that's 1 to 2%. So a significant difference in investment. And that comes out of revenue management teams not clearly enough being able to educate the C-level suite owners. And there are lots of reasons for this, which I would love to go into later. So we'll come back to this, I think, Christian. What are the reasons for the unique challenges in this industry? So we'll come back to that. But I think the outcome is that we have a discipline that has a ton of potential but is underinvested in. And until we get that sorted, the technology just won't fall into place.
Yeah, thanks for making that cultural point, Jens. Again, I think it ties back to the human piece, as well as how organizations, top level or top down, perceive revenue management as opposed to just checking a box. There's so many more, factors to consider. Klaus, you also had some points.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to look at what's changed, right? What's driving the adoption of revenue management, or accelerating it rather, over the last 12 months, right? We have revenue managers not sitting at hotels anymore because they either sit remote or they've been moved to the central office, asking themselves or realizing that it is impossible to manually deal with the increased dynamic market environment and the uncertainty associated with COVID and government restrictions and just the market behavior. It's impossible to do that manually. So people have realized over the last 12, 18 months that they need technology and they need automation and they need some form of either recommendations or decisions that are being made on behalf of them or for them. We have chief operating officers or the C-suite asking more and more pointed questions about where the business is going, how the business is going to look different in the future, how should they forecast, how should they budget. We have investors and asset managers asking about what does that mean to their asset, their real estate value, and what does it mean when they need to go back to the bank and maybe refinance their real estate investment. So what is driving the acceleration of revenue management or revenue science-driven systems, I would call them, is this convergence of factors that people are realizing it's impossible to deal with the situation on a manual basis. Different stakeholders in the organization asking different questions and more pointed questions, and the need for the revenue manager to provide answers very, very rapidly and multiple times a day. And then the last factor is that I think we're seeing, because it all comes back down to data, we're seeing a huge acceleration in the ability and the effectiveness and efficiency of connecting across data providers. And we talked about these circles where everyone is in the middle. I think it should actually be a round circle where everyone is equal, because that's the reality. Everyone is connecting faster and better and easier to each other, and data is starting to flow much better than ever before. And over the next, I think, 12 to 18 months, we see that accelerating even more. So those will be my points.
Thank you, Klaus. Much appreciated. We're coming up to the end of the first set discussion-wise. Alexander, I know you raised your hand as well. Was there anything in particular that you wanted to add to the conversation?
Yes, thank you. We're talking a bit about automation, which is, I think, is the key here going forward in terms of tactical revenue management. But I think what we will see, to tie the knot also to the initial question, is in the next 5 to 10 years, is that we will need to, today, if you have a analytics tool, reporting and so on, it's very much like a library, right? You can pull a lot of reports and you can go as deep as you want to, very much. And I think the next tier in analytics would be to whether the analytics is actually pointing you to where you should focus, right? Because today is very much, if you have analytics, for instance, you can still, it's a biased sort of way of interpret the data in a way, in terms of what area is important for you. And I think that what we will see was also that AI will come into analytics a little bit more, and not only present what's important for you, actually come up with propose actions for you based on this library of enormous amount of data that you have in your tool. So what I'm trying to say is that automation for revenue tactics, no doubt we are already there, but it will also start looking into that, or we'll start seeing that for analytics in the near future, actually.
Excellent point. Thank you very much, everybody, for your perspectives on the future of revenue management. Moving into our next section, which really talks about technology adoption, which has come up in this first section already. As we sort of, in summary, noticed, crisis generally sparks innovation, whereas good times breed complacency to a degree. So the question I'd like to kind of get everybody's 2-minute view on is, what do you think has stopped many hoteliers from adopting technology, especially revenue management technology, to date? And we'll start with Alexander.
Thanks. I think that we touched upon these items earlier here already, but I think the fundamental piece of it is also that we need to understand that hoteliers are not data scientists, and technology has not, by tradition, not been their main focus, and I fully respect that. And I think I speak for all RMS vendors and hotels currently using a modern RMS when I say that there is no doubt of the uplift and benefits of employing a RMS. So it very much comes down to educate the market by showcasing different business cases that hotels can relate to. I think one of those major current misconception is that RMS is expensive, but that is not the true anymore, as costs have come down and they're very easy to use, and especially with automation, right? And we're starting to be able to show sort of ROI and so on. So the triggering point here is to educate the market once again, I think, to increase the adoption rate. And I think we have started to do that, just like forums like this is very important for that.
So what I'm hearing is essentially going back to the trust component that we had earlier as well, right?
Trust, and that trust is built by educating and informing and making sure that, and also for hoteliers, we need to look at the market, and the majority of the market is built up by many smaller hoteliers, right, that don't have the resources to invest in a revenue manager even many times, and for those and for that main adoption in the market, you will not be able to do that with a too broad, big solution. You need to have something that they can embrace and they feel like, I understand this without being a revenue manager or have a master's degree in revenue management, sort of from Cornell. And but we're heading in that direction, I think, and we all of us as providers. So that's through automation. That's excellent, I think, for this industry.
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. Neville.
I mean, I touched on this already, but if we think about adoption in the past, it's very interesting what's happened in the industry, because revenue management systems are not new. They've been around for a while. Ideas, for example, has been around for quite a long time. And what we've seen in the past was that there was adoption of revenue management technology by big chains, and smaller hotels were not using this kind of tools to help them, which is putting them at a disadvantage as well. I think historically that had a lot to do with cost. But as Alexander mentioned, cost is no longer an issue, in my opinion. The cost of investing in revenue management technology is, I think, pretty reasonable, bearing in mind the return that it gives. So since cost is no longer an issue, I think there's really three barriers to adoption. One is culture, and I've mentioned this before. If you don't have a revenue management culture, and if you don't understand what the tool is going to give you, then you're going to be a bit nervous about investing money in it. The other barrier is trust. And again, Alexander mentioned this. We need to demonstrate, we need to show people that using an RMS will have a positive benefit for your business. And I think we can show that. We can show case studies. There's a word of mouth element here as well, obviously. But we need to demonstrate this to hotels. Why should they give us their hard-earned money, basically? And then there also has been barriers, simply technological barriers. And here I would divide this into two different things. One is not so much tech, but it's bad data. And this also goes back to revenue culture. But if you're not, even if you have a great PMS and you have a channel manager and you have all these other systems, you have a CRS and a CRM, people are putting data into these systems. And if they don't do it in a structured way, then you plug in a system that uses artificial intelligence and reads this data, but it's not going to give you the optimal result. And it's amazing to me how many hotels don't pay attention to their data quality. And that's an issue for adoption of technology. And also, and again, this has been mentioned by a few of my colleagues, connectivity is a big challenge for the industry. I mean, Eric mentioned everyone shows their big circle in the middle and the other circles round, that does happen. But all of these circles need to speak to each other, and it's complicated to make sure that all systems connect to each other efficiently and effectively, and that information and data is communicated effectively and efficiently. So you need to make sure that your technology is used in the best possible way and that it can connect with other bits of technology, because if not, you'll never be able to adopt all the tech that you need to make your business better. So I think those are the main areas where we need to make our focus. And I actually do think there's a lot of progress being made already in these areas. But I think historically that's been some of the barriers towards quicker adoption of RMS technology in the industry.
Thank you, Neville. Jens, your perspective, please.
Yes, I think I should clarify that for most of this, I've been talking from the perspective of the revenue management discipline and industry, and not as a technology vendor. Again, because I think technology is symptom here, not the cause. And I think the cause is culture. We need to get owners, C-level within operations, to the point where they have this Homer Simpson moment, the duh moment of like, we need to invest in technology in order to get the results. We need to invest in people to get the results. To get 20% incremental revenue growth, we need to invest 2% of turnover. That's the kind of equation we need to be talking about, and not playing defensively. How much could you give me? Could I have a few €100 a month for this specific tool, which will save me a few hours? I think we need to play offensively. And we need to talk about the big picture. We need to talk about how we compare to other more innovative brands, how we compare to other industries, what we want the revenue management discipline to be. Do we train people? Do we upskill them? Do we invest in this? Or do we just treat it as something that we do operationally? Nobody really cares about. And that makes a huge difference. If we look at the innovative brands in the industry, let's take one example, Sonder. They're doing innovative stuff. They've raised some money. They have some interesting business models. If you look at the job spec they have up for revenue managers, read through it. It's pretty interesting. Commercial analyst is basically the role. The bullet points contain lots of stuff about data, lots of stuff about commercial acumen, and only at the very end, optionally, hospitality revenue management background. And I'm not saying that that should be the default for everybody, but I think it's an interesting indicator for where we should be going. And I think to Alex's point, not everybody is a data scientist and shouldn't have to be one. I think that's true. But we do need to be analytical and commercially minded and strategic if we want this industry to be interesting in 5 to 10 years' time. And that, of course, interesting is a subjective thing, but that's at least our version of interesting. We want it to be all of those things. And we want the revenue growth that revenue management adds to be recognized on a strategic level. So I think I'll leave some of the challenges. I guess maybe I'll give you the headlines, but for the challenges in the industry. So I think structural challenge has been mentioned. In what other industry do you have the brand owners, asset owners, operators as separate co's? That's kind of a huge thing in this industry, very unique to the industry, where you have the operator in the middle, the asset owner paying the bills, the brand owner trying to stifle or create lock-ins. So that's kind of a very unique situation, which is hard to deal with. And then we have the communication challenge, where revenue management has typically not been great at blowing their own horn, so to speak, internally, demonstrating the uplift. I think that's presentational communication challenge, which I think really should be taught, and we should make more noise about in the industry. How do we communicate what we're doing? And then thirdly, the tech challenge. But I don't think that's really only the connectivity. I think that connects again with point one more than anything, where there hasn't been enough investment. All of these problems are solvable, and in other industries they have been solved. It's just here we don't have enough money going into solving these issues. So people are saying, oh, let's just pick the cheapest option. It doesn't matter what the connectivity is. How many euros per room, we'll go with that one. And I think that's the source of the issue, not the other way around.
Thanks for those points. Again, perception, culture, I think communication, and then finally the tech. But not putting the tech in first place. The other things have to happen first. So thanks for putting that into perspective, Jens. Eric, your perspective, please.
Yeah, a couple of things that I'd like to continue on with from what's already been mentioned. I think for a long, long time, hotels have generally had a very low opinion or placed a very low priority on technology. As long as the lobby looks nice, the rooms look great, website looks fantastic, the tech has to work. You can't have too many complaints from the staff, from the tech. And for a long, long time, the tech was often in the back office somewhere gathering dust, or maybe in the luggage room, sharing space with guest luggage. I'm sharing exact real life anecdotes here. I'm not making this stuff up. So for many, many years, I'm talking about 5-star, 4-star hotels have had a relatively low priority in terms of tech. It's been inherited. Whatever has already been in place when the manager arrived remains. Now, that's one issue. But the other overriding issue, which increases the overall, let's say, difficulty of the industry evolving is the incredible fragmentation of the industry. Now, I'm not just saying fragmentation as a throwaway word, but the reality of fragmentation is that we've got companies with 300 to 500 hotel customers who have been in business for 20 or 30 years or more, who have long-standing relationships with these hotels in different parts of the world. In Spain, for example, where Neville's based, there's at least 10 local Spanish PMS suppliers. They might have a couple of customers in South America or Mexico, but they live and breathe on the Spanish market. If you want to do business as an outside tech supplier, you've been selected by a Spanish hotel, and you don't integrate with one or more of those suppliers, good luck. And the same could be said for France, Italy, Greece, Germany, UK. A lot of these, I'm talking PMS suppliers right now, who have got years and years of experience, have been there for hoteliers through thick or thin. For example, a really common support issue, two common support issues. One, lightning hits the hotel and goes to the PABX, fries the PABX, fries the motherboard that was connected to the interface box, no system. Someone from the PMS company, 3 a.m. on a Sunday when it's raining, has come out and spent a few hours and fixed things eventually. That kind of support, or another example, you've run out of point of sale rolls for the receipt roll paper in your restaurant. You don't have any more. You call up your supplier, they've come out there again and saved the day. There's many, many, many examples of fragmented industry suppliers in different parts of the world who have been there for the hotels, like I said, through thick or thin. And now, when there's newer technology available, maybe those legacy suppliers haven't evolved. They started in client server, or they started on Unix or whatever, and never really migrated towards the cloud. They don't have any developers left who just support the system. There's a lot of situations like that where they're just surviving off the support revenue. Now, some new supplier has now shown a system to the hotel sees the value, wants to integrate, that's where it stops. Or there's a fee, and the fee is astronomical, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure all of the suppliers here have come up upon those situations in some parts of the world. I'm not saying every situation is like that, but we have the fragmentation plus a general malaise perception from hotels in terms of tech. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Let's keep it all running. Let's not try and mess things up here. I've seen those situations many times over.
Thanks, Eric. I think the afterthought piece, to tech that you mentioned, and also in combination with change is difficult. I'm very used to what I've always had, and I think I've been there, done that. Probably a lot of us have at some point in our careers, and I think life's just too short to be dealing with a bad tech stack. So with that, I'm passing it over to Klaus to bring us home here.
Bring you home, yeah. I'll bring you to the hotel. Take me to the Hilton, right? I have a little bit of a different perspective, right? I feel, having worked in hotels for many, many years, or in hotel companies, independent and brands, the reality is people have a limited amount of money to spend, and between the owners or asset managers, the general managers and the department heads, you have to make trade-offs, right? And different people look at the different value propositions of the investments that they can make. For the asset managers, how can I increase my asset value so I can sell the real estate down the road for a higher price? For the general manager, it's how can I be more productive and more profitable? And then for the department heads, it's all about how do I keep my employees engaged, happy, satisfied, and how do I serve my guests more efficiently? And you have to make all these trade-offs, and you have a limited amount of money to spend. So you're going to spend it where you will believe you get the most return on investment, whatever that return is, higher guest satisfaction, higher profitability, higher asset value. So we all have a responsibility as technology vendors to prove the value and to bring confidence to people that make investment decisions that the money they're going to spend on this particular piece of technology revenue management system or other, is money better spent than on upgrading their housekeeping system or upgrading their rooms or meeting space. So you're constantly competing with investment decisions. It's our job. I don't want to blame anyone in the hotel industry. It's our job to prove to the hotel industry, to the asset managers, the owners, the revenue managers, the financial people, that spending the money on this particular piece of technology is the best possible financial decision that they can make for this particular point in time. So it's up to us to convince the stakeholders that the decision they're going to make is the best possible decision that they can make. And that just comes through the trust and the confidence and constantly providing the value and proving the value back to them. It's fairly simple.
Thanks, Klaus. I wish everything was that simple. I think Jens had a comment on your feedback.
Yeah, I think just in the spirit of opening the conversation, I think Klaus is right that every investment needs to be needs to have a rationale and needs to have an ROI attached to it. But I think there is also the strategic element, and you mentioned, Klaus, upgrading a meeting room. Would you agree that there are certain decisions that are more strategic than others? And I think if we look at do we have a solid professional revenue management team which has the resources to execute versus meeting spaces, I think one should just be a no-brainer. I think that's where the industry needs to get to. I think that's what we're driving for. An analogy would be, 20 years ago, you would have to produce an ROI case for a website if you were a retailer, or you would have to, 10 years ago in hospitality, produce an ROI for should we have a Facebook page or should we have mobile booking. Some of those things have just become no-brainers, and I think we shouldn't be needing to penny pinch on the individual basis. We should be saying these are tactics. If we want to be innovative in hospitality and drive revenue and drive a successful business, we need to have teams and tech that are fit for purpose.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and it's absolutely true. And the big difference we've seen over the last 12 months versus 2008 and 2010 is that the majority of the industry actually understands the value of revenue management in times that are difficult, not just in times of high demand. So we have seen a huge shift versus 12, 13 years ago in the perception of revenue management as a key competitive driver. And we have had more people asking us, what else can you do for us, than people asking us, can we just uninstall your system, which we actually had almost none. So the level of conversations about let's do more and let's innovate more and let's do things faster has been incredible over the last 12 months.
Hey, I've got two questions here, or comments from the audience, and it kind of talks about something that Eric mentioned earlier in terms of the fragmented technology landscape here. One is from Liliana, saying that the challenge for smaller hotels in particular is the integration problem, right? You've got legacy problems, they've already been in place, they've already been well utilized, but then you want to bring in something else. Bolt on top is not necessarily as easy. So that was one question on how to better overcome those particular obstacles. And then along the same lines, we had Pravina also commenting about the legacy systems, which can't necessarily integrate with, we always talk about API, protocols, easy, plug and play, not a problem. But again, talking about the same issue. So what would you, Eric, and everybody else for that matter, recommend to those smaller operators, how to overcome those without, and I think Klaus, as well as Jens, you made the point in terms of without massive investments of ripping everything out and putting a whole new tech stack in place?
Yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about. And, the PMS is working just fine until you want to improve the business and add a new module. Like, for example, you're a first-time user of an RMS. You've selected the RMS, you've narrowed down the list, and you'd now like to at least do a trial or start using it. PMS is the blocker. I've described a few of the reasons why the PMS might be the blocker. But Christian, what you just said now about without being heavy-handed and ripping out the whole stack, that's actually not a big deal anymore. It used to be a huge deal. To consider changing your PMS so that you have something more open and adaptable and flexible for your future business is not a huge capex. In fact, it's a zero capex, or let's say almost zero capital expenditure because of your upfront training costs that are sometimes there. It's usually an operational expense today with cloud-based systems. So I'm not encouraging, I'm not advocating heavy-handed negotiation to say to your PMS, if you don't interface, well, we have to consider an alternative PMS. I'm not advocating that, but don't think that's off the table. As hoteliers, you should be aware that, yes, we've got some really cool RMS solutions being represented here today. I think almost everybody offers a no obligation free trial. Hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn in that regard. But on the PMS side, you've got 3 or 4 times as many different PMS solutions that are new, cloud-based, low cost, easy to test and deploy. So Christian, I'm 100% with you 5-10 years ago about considering ripping out the heart of the hotel technology, which is the PMS. That's really the heart of the hotel's tech stack, in my opinion. But today, it's not that big a deal. What's missing, though, is obviously the human component. And in this regard, you need obviously either a trusted supplier of the new PMS who can give you all of that project management that's needed in terms of coordinating all these things, because technology, hotel tech consultants who would be capable of managing these projects are few and far between. So I would say only really consider that if your new supplier is someone that has done this before and it's giving you assurances and guarantees, that otherwise the risk is too high.
Thanks for that clarification, Eric. I think that's very helpful. Neville.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I agree with what Eric said, and this is a problem that we come up against when we go and sell to customers, and then we talk to their PMS and we find that it can't give us the data we need, or there's a lot of issues. And I think, again, I'm not advocating that all hoteliers just change their PMS so they can use the RMS that they want, but I think there is a bigger picture that hotels need to think about. And what you need to think about is, what is the strategy for my business? What do I need to do to commercialize my business in an optimal way? And once you've decided that, then you have to decide, what technology do I have which will help me to reach that goal? And that technology is a PMS, it's an RMS, it's an upselling platform, it's a CRS, a CRM. And then you need to think about the big picture. What is my tech stack? What do I need? Do they talk to each other or not? And then you have to make decisions about whether you're willing to sacrifice part of your strategy because you're not willing to go through the pain of changing one bit of technology. And I've been through, in a chain, a PMS change and an RMS change, and it's pretty painful. So I do understand there's a certain amount of resistance here. But after both of these changes, after the initial, I think it's called the Valley of Despair, right? After this point, the benefits that we saw from having taken these decisions were enormous. So I think that this is a big picture decision. It's not, okay, this doesn't talk to this one, so I'm going to change it. It's, what do I need in order to maximize my profits and have the best commercial strategy for my business? And if you don't have what you need, then you need to decide what to do. So I think this is a decision that people have to think about at a top level.
Thanks, Neville.
All right. Just adding on to that, I love what Neville said, and actually some of those things were my thoughts as well. I would actually encourage any hotelier to come back to the point that Eric made earlier. is to look at the revenue management system as the center, because what's happened over the last few years is the capabilities and the data needs of a revenue management system are far, far superior of the data needs and capabilities of a CRS and a PMS. So when you make decisions about how you're structuring your technology stack and what you need to optimize your commercial capabilities over the future, please look at your revenue management capabilities first and what you want to have, and then work backwards and think about what PMS connects best and integrates best with those capabilities, what CRS connects best with those capabilities. In many cases, we all find ourselves in a situation where somebody's made a PMS decision or a CRS decision only later to find out that the PMS or the CRS don't support the very, very advanced capabilities that we all have in the revenue management system space. So if I can give you one piece of advice, look at your revenue management system, look at the commercial capabilities, and then please look back, work backwards or work sidewards to your PMS and CRS, and not the other way around, because otherwise you have the risk of being faced with a lot of disappointment.
I think that's to just add to that. I think that's really good advice, and I think there's a lot to viewing the revenue platform as the center of the ecosystem and not peripheral to the ecosystem. But I think in response to the specific question here from the audience, I would take a slightly stronger line, which is you need to rip it out. You need to rip the old PMSs out. And this sounds controversial, but I think the point here is there are 800, 900 PMSs in the world. Who will be there in 5 to 10 years' time? We're talking about the slightly longer term here. Will there be 800 or 900? Every other industry has gone the consolidation route. And cloud is clearly winning. The old ones are not able to build that. So there will be 10 to 20 PMSs and RMSs which will be the leaders, all cloud, natively built on cloud in 5 to 10 years. You don't want to be the last 10, 50, 100 hotels on a sinking ship. So I think at some point that pain will come, and I think it's important to view this strategically. And you will be hamstrung with tech that doesn't connect. So I think that's super important. For us, that's meant we focus only on what is the 10, 20% of the market that is cloud. We focus on what will be the 50 to 80% of the market in 5 years' time. We don't build connectivity, we build innovation. That's enabled us to build stuff nobody has really seen on the product side, but it means that we have less coverage of the market. And I think those are the trade-offs we've made.
Thank you, Jens. Before we move on to the last section, just a quick question, Alex. Do you have any additional points that you'd like to make?
I think what everyone has said is very good, and I think that what we usually say is that if the PMS is the heart, then the RMS is very much the brain. So and it goes with what has been said here earlier as well. So nothing to add really. I think every hotelier needs to take this seriously, and it's just not shop a certain part of the technology, but look at the whole tech stack and take a more strategic decision when it comes to this in terms of not only the RMS, but also, as everyone said, PMS, CRS, channel manager, and so on.
Thank you, Alexander. Great discussion, guys. Thank you so much. So for our last section, we'll be looking at advanced revenue management metrics, or KPIs. As part of my recent involvement with HSMAI's KPI work group, over the past 6 months, we've identified over 60 critical metrics that should ideally be paid more attention to. So the question I have for the panel is, how can technology become more holistic in the way it tracks, measures, and improves performance for a broader spectrum of key performance indicators? And I'll pass it over to Neville for the first 2 minutes.
60 KPIs, that's kind of scary, yeah? I actually, there are a lot of KPIs in revenue management already. And sometimes if you sit down and watch two experienced revenue managers talking to each other, after about 10 minutes, you want to kill yourself because there's so many KPIs and metrics and numbers that it's like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. So I do think there are more things we need to measure. But I think we need to be careful about choosing metrics which really add understanding of our business and which will allow us to take better decisions than we take now. So I'm not a fan of hundreds of KPIs. I'm a fan of the right KPIs. And in terms of the evolution of KPIs versus where we are right now, I think this goes a long way in line with what we were talking about earlier on about total revenue management. We have KPIs for rooms, and just about everybody knows what they are. We have market share KPIs. We have KPIs for meeting rooms as well. But I think there are some additional things that we need to start thinking about in revenue management, which perhaps in other areas of the business we're already looking at, and things like customer lifetime value. I think this is very important because the cost of customer acquisition is very high. So if we can increase customer lifetime value, this is very important, I think. And I think it's important for revenue management, not just for marketing. We've been talking for a long time about net ADR. I think systems need to show this. We need to see these KPIs as much in real time as possible. And that's not easy. And I also think that we need to move towards a situation, and this going back to what we were talking about total revenue management. Basically, if we talk about total revenue management, we should be maximizing all of the spaces that we have in our hotels. We're not just maximizing the rooms or the meeting rooms, we're maximizing the lobby. I mean, if you go into like a Citizen M hotel, they have this sort of multidisciplinary space that's a lobby and a check-in and a reception, and they're generating revenues all day. We need to find ways to measure that. And I think we should be moving towards being able to measure revenue per available space or per available meter, because we should be maximizing all of the square meters that we have in our properties. So I think those are metrics that we should be working towards being able to have. It's not so easy to get there. We need data. And actually, if you ask some hotels what their net cost is per channel, they don't know. So obviously, speaking as a technology provider, we need to know because we need to receive the data, because then we can take decisions based on that data. So there's a lot to do here. But I would say customer lifetime value, net ADR, and revenue per available space would be key elements in the future that we should be measuring.
You're mute again, Christian.
I was taking Trevor's kind of feedbacks like mute yourself. Sorry. I think I like the point, Neville, that you made on relevancy, making sure you use the right KPIs for your business at that moment in time, for that period, for those objectives. And I think also making sure that then, to your point again, technology is doing whatever they can in order to incorporate those KPIs and the tracking pieces into their platforms. Because I think it's not just enough, and this is something that we came across in our work group, that fair enough, you have 60 KPIs, which is a lot. But again, if I have to dig them up one by one and go on a wild goose chase or like a treasure hunt in order to get those, it's not necessarily going to help us, and it doesn't going to help the revenue community. So very valid points here. Jens, what is your perspective on KPIs?
Well, I have a lot to say. I think data is incredibly important. I'll continue my path on talking about culture and people, I think, because I think that really comes to, I'll talk about this in a second, but it comes to the heart of what needs to happen. I think the actual KPIs are not super complicated. We used to think about rooms, but clearly rooms is one of our products. What we need to think about are basically our product is real estate. So square foot or square meter, that's our asset. That's what we have. That's what we're selling in various shapes and forms. And the people we're selling it to are the guests. And that's where we should be allocating revenue. We should be allocating revenue to guests because we can target them again. We can do stuff with them. We can speak to them. We can welcome them in different ways. We can send them offers. And we should be allocating revenue to square foot or square meters because we can strategically think about what products are the optimal allocation of a specific building, property, or a specific space. So I think that's not too hard. And we actually have this live with customers. We have both gross operating profit per square meter and gross operating profit per guest live with the most innovative customers in our universe. But what's harder, I think, is to get the buy-in, the organizational buy-in, and to do stuff with the data. I think just having the metrics sit there is one thing. And I've been guilty of this in the past, previous roles where I have come in and have driven transformation. I've been guilty of finding the right metrics, objectively right for a business, and having them sit in dashboards and not really be used. And what we have found, and what I have found in the past, is really you need the strategic buy-in. You need the willingness of the organization and the understanding of the commercial impact. You need the CEO to be bought into mentioning this metric, using the metric, talking about the organization, talking to the organization about this metric. I think that's what needs to happen. And from there, you get this really amazing effect where people start driving towards that metric in different functions, not only revenue management, but marketing start thinking about GoPAM, sales start thinking about GoPAM. Strategically, you start having different conversations. That's where stuff really happens. But that needs to come from having strategic buy-in, understanding the value of data effectively and being analytical, then having a data strategy in place. And then from there, having the data infrastructure in place where you have one repository of data, one data lake, data warehouse, abstraction layer, place to access this for the whole organization, where you can have somebody who joined the company 6 months ago, they can go in and start to think about new ways to drive the number one and number two metric of the company or the KPI of the company. They can start to innovate and come up with ideas and test them. In order for that to happen, it needs to be accessible to everybody. And that's where you get the commercial impact, the execution. But you need to have those two layers in place first. The understanding of the value of data and business intelligence and KPIs, then the strategy, and then the infrastructure.
Do you think maybe, Jens, that might be like a bit of a chicken egg thing too, in terms of having the technology being able to track all the metrics adequately, so they're easily accessible at a push of a button? Or do we really need to have that understanding first from top level down? Okay, what is it actually we should be focusing on? What is the direction the company is going to go? Or should they happen right at the same time? It's kind of, if I see something, right, using your example of retail earlier, if I see something on a dashboard in a system, it's like, oh, this is interesting. Okay, yeah, let's talk about this. Let's focus on this. Let's make this top of our agenda. Or is it creating the idea first and then going to the technology providers and saying, we would like to start tracking this. What can you do for us?
Yeah, and you know, all organizations are different. So I'm not trying to, I guess I'm fairly prescriptive here based on my experience. Obviously, your results may vary, but I've seen a lot of analysis paralysis with data. I think in my experience, if you go beyond 3 to 5 metrics or KPIs, the organization loses themselves and people have their favorite KPIs and people aren't really pulling in the same direction. And I think that needs to be agreed on a company level. Otherwise, you have different teams and different organizations, each with their own KPIs, which is helpful for bonus calculations and performance calculations, but doesn't really help the organization move forward. And I would maybe chicken and egg, but these metrics are out there. It's not too hard. It takes a day of work with one analyst if you want to pull together a report, regardless of the infrastructure you're on, to be using net RevPAR. Not perfectly, you don't have all the commission costs, but you can have a net RevPAR, or you can have a margin by product type. So I think it's there. I think it's really it needs to come from a strategic alignment within the organizations. And again, GoPam and GoPag are available, and I think there's a fair amount of agreement in the industry that we need to move beyond RevPAR. And that hasn't really happened in the last 10 years that we've been discussing this. So I would argue that we need to have these discussions on the operational side and the line, and the CEO needs to kind of mention this in all hands and say, this is what we're driving towards, people.
Agreed. Thank you, Jens. Eric.
Yes, thanks, Christian. A couple of things, a couple of pieces of feedback. Now, I know Neville. I've met Neville many times. He's a very, very nice chap. Neville, when you said we don't need hundreds of KPIs, but the right KPIs, you're not an arrogant person. I want to reiterate that. You're a good guy. But I think as technology suppliers, we need to be really careful using statements like the right KPIs. Now, Neville is a really good example of a very experienced, very capable, high-level, experienced operator. What Neville says is right is probably right. Now, that does not apply to every supplier in the market in every situation. My approach is always try and integrate everything in the most optimal way so that whatever data needs to be surfaced or whatever KPI needs to be surfaced is inherently a simple task, as Jens was saying earlier. Now, if the data is not integrated, okay, obviously you've hit a brick wall. And Jens talked about different ways of acquiring the OTA commission costs, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so Jens also talked about proving the strategic value to optimize the asset or to prove the strategic value of the data, which I fully agree. I think Jens mentioned data lake. So we've built a data lake. We have 35,000 hotels currently in the Zucchetti Hospitality data lake. And so Libra is connected to this data lake, and we surface a lot of information. We surface insights on demand that aren't available anywhere from any OTA or anywhere. So that's the way we then present the information to hoteliers in a real-time, real way, so that they're looking at demand from their neighborhood or their cluster of hotels or their area. So but that innovation, anyone can do this if you have the cooperation and collaboration between companies. I'd like to think that we're all good mates here, even though we have competitive solutions in some cases. But that cooperation and collaboration in our case is coming from other hotel tech companies, some of which are within Zucchetti Group of companies, others are not, but they have an understanding of the value of a completely open and holistic integration for the benefit of every solution out there. So I completely agree with what Jens is talking about. We're doing this, we're walking the walk and talking the talk, so to speak. And like I said, I'm not having a go at Neville at all. I'm just, whoever would ever say the hotels just need to look at the right data, like just let's not have a go at hotels. Look, even if hoteliers genuinely are asking for stuff that's maybe ridiculous, if it can be done, why not do it? If it's not a problem to schedule it, at least to be done in the next few sprints or the next 18 months, if it would mean the world to the hotelier that we agree on a plan to eventually deliver whatever they're asking, why not do it? Like, of course, unless it's not a ridiculous type of request that we can speak about from an educational point of view. So just a couple of pieces of feedback from my side.
Thank you, Eric. Much appreciated. As I said, I love the friendly banter. Keep it going. Klaus, if you want to go next.
Yeah, sure. 60 KPIs are clearly too much, but I think there is a realization. Again, I come back to the different stakeholders that are involved in owning, running, operating a hotel, and everyone has a different view of what the needs are, right? So I don't think over the long term we'll get away from RevPAR as a key metrics or RGI, because that's what investors and Wall Street and analysts look at when they compare one company against the other. And we're in earnings season right now, and you'll see kind of the key comparison is obviously kind of RGI as well as the revenue numbers and overall trajectory. So I don't think we'll get away from that anytime soon. But having said that, I do believe that hotels need to be focused on optimizing the most profitable guest and getting the most profit into their business. And that obviously drives us down to net revenue, and not just net revenue per available room, but net revenue for the entire hotel. And then ultimately, obviously, the profitability of the hotel and the profitability of each guest. So getting down to an opportunity to optimize at the most profitable guest level is definitely something that is being done today and is being automated today, and revenue management systems can handle and should handle. And that's where we're moving towards. And then once you fold in the other technology components, obviously you can add on as many KPIs as you want. But when I was dealing at IHG at a very regional level, I looked at 2 or 3 key KPIs that told me how hotels are doing, how any of the 200-300 hotels are doing that I was looking after with my team, and which ones I need to focus on.
Thank you, Klaus. Alexander, are you on mute?
I'm muted. Yeah, sorry about that. No, I'm not muted, right?
Now
you hear me?
Yep.
Good. Thanks. So especially if you go upscale segments for hotels where they have increased ancillary revenue streams, I mean, this becomes, I think, all those 60 KPIs, they're just crazy. And I think that KPIs, in all honor, but to measure things is very important, but even better to do is to be able to take action on these KPIs, right? So if I would tell you, for instance, that if you would choose a certain RMS and they would lower your RevPAR by 5%, how does that feel? And you would probably say that's not that good. But then if I add to that while you lowering the RevPAR, that increase in occupancy will drive ancillary revenue streams, so the TrevPAR will increase, right? How does that feel? So all of a sudden, to lower the RevPAR, to increase the TrevPAR is good. And then we add to that while we increase your TrevPAR, we unfortunately will need to increase your cost base. So your total profit per available room will be lower than it was before. Then we're back to square zero. So or square one maybe. So what I'm trying to say here is that as many of my colleagues here have said, it depends on the type of hotel, if you are upscale or not. If you have, in terms of ancillary revenue streams, sometimes can constitute a big portion, sometimes even greater than the room revenue, right? Then those KPIs are more relevant. But also the fact that they need to be actionable, and RMSs should not only measure, but they should also be able to take action on these different KPIs, and all these KPIs should be reflected in pricing, but also come up with suggestions what to do with the result, what the KPI shows. That's very important, I think.
Thank you, Alex. And I think, when I started this third section by talking about 60 KPIs, and just to clarify, I'm really glad that you kind of picked up on this. In summary, it is super important to be very aware of what the objectives are for the company at each kind of stage of the year, the season, the month, or whatever it may be. So as opposed to looking at the whole, let's call it the data lake of KPIs, kind of narrow in, zoom into the ones that are most relevant for the property, and making sure that you're also then aware of, okay, what sort of result is being expected, and what actions, Alexander, to your point, what actions should be taken, and what sort of consequences can I expect from those. Neville, I believe you had some feedback as well.
Am I right to reply? I fully agree with Eric that I am a really nice guy. So I just wanted to clarify a little bit, because actually, sadly, there's not going to be much polemic here, but I actually I more or less agree with Eric. What I mean is, not all hotels need the same KPIs. And I'm not going to come and say I'm the Oracle of Delphi and you need to look at this. But I do think, and this, you just mentioned this right now, Christian, that if you're looking at lots of KPIs in your hotel, you'll lose focus. So you need to decide which ones are best for your business. And a 1,000 bedroom resort property in Cancun doesn't need the same KPIs as a 50 bedroom boutique hotel in Paris. But in both cases, they don't need to be looking at 50, 60, 100 KPIs. They need to choose the best ones for their business. And then Eric is right. We should be able to give them those if they want them. So just a little clarification. I'm not putting myself up as some kind of guru who has to tell people what they need to do. But I do think people should be wary or carefully select what it is they want to measure.
Thanks, Neville. Okay, we've got Eric's buy-in, fantastic. A question, as we talk about KPIs, and one of the sort of, not necessarily the end result, but as part of this discussion that we've had at this work group, was that ultimately everything sort of points into the direction of profit. So I'd like to get the panel's perspective on, profit. We've heard net ADR as well, and how much of an importance profit has moving forward. Is it the one that rules them all ultimately, or is it just going to be one of the other alongside our just most recent conversation, Neville, what you brought up, in making sure it's the right KPI for the right time for the right property?
Can I start?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. No, but I think it's just like any other business where you this is a strategic decision, right? So if you are in a, let's say they're a hotel chain and you are after growth, then the profitability is of less importance compared to top line revenue, for instance. That might be the case. So the short answer to that is, once again, depends on the type of hotel, but also from a strategic perspective, what are you? Where are you, on your strategic journey? Sort of, are you on a growth path if you're a hotel group or a hotel chain, or are you do you want just to create a sustainable business over time? Then it might more be of a KPI that's going toward profit, right? So it depends where you are in that journey, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with what Alexander is saying. I just want to also put a couple of points to frame further what he's saying is, in terms of profitability, and let's say the guest in this case, I always like to think in terms of the lifetime value of the guest. I think in revenue management technology, a lot of pricing decisions, they're often optimized based on that particular stay profile. Yeah, optimizing the maximum revenue based on that single stay profile. And I'm always reminded of a story of a regular guest in Australia who used to go down to Melbourne 5 or 6 times a year, always staying at the Grand Hyatt or one of the Hyatt brands, and happy, super loyal guest, always stayed there. And then one of his his next trips coincided with the Bledisloe Cup. And if you don't know what the Bledisloe Cup is, it's Australia versus New Zealand in rugby. It's huge. It's as big an event as it gets in terms of Australia v New Zealand. Melbourne is sold out. You cannot get a room unless you're paying triple rack rate type of thing. So anyway, he asked to make a booking. He was offered a room because he's a very regular guest at 3 times the usual rate. And he obviously gave the feedback that he's a regular guest and this wasn't right. And it was a totally soured experience. And I will always use that example for hotels to think about the total lifetime value of the guest. And would it really have killed the hotel to give him his regular rate during the Bledisloe Cup, and that he continues to stay there year on year on year, and the rest of his colleagues in business? So just to come back to the question about profitability, let's think, as Alexander was saying, on the framework. What's the strategic framework we're talking about? What's our long-term profitability objective? And do we need to sacrifice profits in the short term for longer-term gain?
Yeah, just adding on there, I like that. I like that story. We all had stories. Actually, the people working in hotels all have stories about regular guests and how to deal with them. I think, but there's not going to be one KPI, because you have to kind of look at from a commercial perspective. You look at the customer journey, and then you need to evaluate how you're optimizing that particular piece of the customer journey, right? From how do you get in front of the segment that you're trying to attract? How do you get them to convert? How do you get them to book? How do you get them to stay and then return, right? So each step of the journey warrants its own KPI. And then you overlay that with, is this guest a profitable guest? What's the lifetime value of the guest? And then how do I optimize my entire business, not just not just siloed by revenue stream? So I think the complexity will increase. There is going to be new KPIs that are going to emerge. Overall, we're not going to change a lot about how we measure the industry, but on an individual hotel level and department level, we'll be able to dig much deeper into what drives revenue, what drives profitability, and what does a most profitable guest look like. And we're already able to do that today with, for example, casino customers and other things.
I just wanted to add here, I agree completely with what my colleagues have been saying up to now. And when I was a hotel revenue manager, which was quite a while ago, our focus was almost exclusively on the top line. We were focused on increasing top line revenues. And that has gradually changed, and there is more of a focus on profit and also the cost of the decisions that you're taking. And this goes also back to this convergence of disciplines. When the marketing spend their money on an online marketing campaign, for example, and what price are you selling at that time? And are you showing availability at that time? So you have to avoid that we waste money as a hotel because our decisions aren't in line with other decisions that are being made within the company. So we do have to focus increasingly on profit, I think. Having said that, as Alex said at the beginning, it depends where you are as a business. If it's your first year of operation as a hotel, you're probably not going to make a profit, and probably not in your second year, and maybe in your third year. And that's in your business plan. So I think you need to have access to this data. I think you need to look at it, but then it's up to every company to decide what focus they're going to put on these metrics according to where they are in their business cycle.
Thank you, Neville. And with that,
Can I just make a comment to Neville's what he said?
Yes, go ahead, Alex.
No, I absolutely agree with Neville, and it also puts a lot of. I mean, we talked earlier. Neville, I think, mentioned the challenge we have across hotels today with the historical data, and that is non-qualified many times, and this doesn't get better when you get to ancillary revenue streams as well, because then all of a sudden you have the cost side of things to consider as well, and it's also comes down to challenge to qualify those cost elements per, if you're going for profit, for instance, per ancillary revenue stream and your overall business, and that puts in even a greater sort of effort on structuring your data, right? So I just want to make that comment.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. So with that, we come to the end of this part of the show. Just to kind of wrap up and kind of hit on some of the key topics we talked about for all of those different sections. We talked about the importance of culture. We talked about the importance of education as one of the almost the prerequisites of adopting technology and making it work efficiently. But then yet again, we also found that corporate buy-in, top-level buy-in is absolutely essential in order to kind of drive the message and making sure that communication both internally as well as externally from the technology community is important in order to make sure that key stakeholders understand what the value is, making sure the trust is being built, using specific examples and overcoming some of those hurdles, and one of which being, integration, which I think was highlighted in particular in the adoption section of this. So I'd like to thank you all. I'm going to pass it back over to Trevor to essentially bring us home with some of the Q&As from the audience.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks for moderating that excellently for us, and thanks for all the contributions. I have to say, sitting here watching it, I hope everyone else viewing has enjoyed it as much as I have. Just quick question for everybody. I mean, I know we said 2 hours, so we've got about 10 minutes in that slot. Could everyone raise the hands who has to leave dead on 10 minutes time? Because that will kind of lead me into how many questions I may be asked. So Klaus, you've got to go dead on. Okay. All right. So we'll kind of try and keep that in mind, because I also want the chance for you guys to have a chance to wrap up. Quick question, maybe picking up, trying to draw a couple of themes here. We spoke about metrics, we've spoken about TRM, we've spoken about profitability. Jens has touched on trying to kind of move the discussion beyond you pay a few pounds to become more efficient and save some money, and actually how do we drive more revenue? How do we drive profitability? I heard TRM mentioned probably about 13 years ago. So when I hear it's going to happen in 5 years, I guess I kind of wonder why it hasn't happened in the last 5 years, and there might be some factors to it. If we're now talking about total profitability, and I think some of you have already just indicated, Alexander, you just mentioned a couple of points there about some of the challenges around it. I mean, again, is this just another 3-letter acronym that is going to be spoken about within the revenue management circles? But are we actually going to drive them and bring this to fruition?
No, I think if I just go first, or if I can go first, I think the key driver is that the winds are shifting and the conversations are changing. And what we hear from our clients is an appetite and a desire to do more in areas outside rooms revenue. And maybe one of the drivers is that many feel that rooms revenue is covered to some extent. We made an acquisition a few years ago in a company called SmartSpace, who is able to pull data together from the sales and catering revenue streams, and we're able to integrate that. And we launched a product called RevPlan last year, which enables a revenue manager to forecast across all of the revenue streams and bring in some of our science into the total revenue forecasting as well as operational forecasting. And we've seen huge take up for that product. So there is definitely an appetite from the industry to pursue and explore and implement total revenue management activities and grow their capabilities, because many feel that they have done the rooms revenue management bit and they need to equally optimize other revenues, and B, the data is now available, it's accessible, and it's easier to aggregate data from across revenue streams.
Okay, thank you. Jens, I think you had something you wanted to add into that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Trevor, on TRM, and it goes to the wider point here of what is the symptom and the cause. And I think this is a message, a little bit of a early wrap-up message for the audience, where you are in revenue management, director, revenue manager, or VP, it doesn't really matter. You're part of a team doing revenue management. The message is you are responsible for 10 to 20% of incremental revenue for your business. If you're not doing your job right, or you're not doing it optimally, that revenue goes away, never to be seen again. And that happens year after year. So own this. Act like this is incremental revenue and revenue growth. Ask for resources. Ask for the right tools, platforms. Ask for the right people on your team. Get educated on what the possibilities are. And I think a corollary to that, we've now had 4 or 5 of the leading RMSs. This is not a big space. There's 5 to 10 RMSs globally that are doing interesting stuff. If you are not seeing what they're doing and having a demo with them every quarter, I would go so far as to say, as you're not really doing your right job, you're not doing your job right, because tech is such an important component of revenue management. And this is an investment of 6 hours a quarter, speaking to one of these vendors for 30 minutes and adding them all up. So I think that's a critical message. We see far too many companies in this industry looking at one or two solutions, or just continuing to work with the same vendors. We need to evaluate our options and know what's out there. It's a very small investment every 3 months.
Yeah, good point. Anyone else want to pick up from that?
Yeah,
Eric, yeah.
I think I agree with what Jens and also Klaus have just said. And I think in terms of, we're having a conversation today, right now, based on the status quo. We have, like Jens was saying, 5 or 10 major suppliers of RMS who are doing interesting things globally. There are many suppliers in lots of different categories, and some will play nicely with others. Some won't play nicely with others. Forgive me for stating the obvious. That's the status quo. We're a little bit different. So my perspective is coming from a different point of view. We are one company amongst a group of many other companies. And within the group of hospitality tech companies, it's still the same situation. Some companies play nicely, or let's say better, with others, even within the same group. It's like a family, right? You've got your favorite's uncle and whatever. So, but when you've got, let's say, a sister company who's doing interesting things in another area, you can actually have a conversation, a bit like we're having now, but about what's possible. Like, well, this is everything that we do. In other words, you can open the kimono. And I'm not sure if that expression carries across in this part of the world. You can both open the kimono to understand exactly what's possible, what's not possible, or collectively, what should be possible. And this is where we're at. It's a very early part of it's a very early stage, but it's super exciting. And Klaus mentioned the acquisition of SmartSpace. That's a great acquisition. We were acquired by Zucchetti during the pandemic, right in the early stages. But there are absolutely more acquisitions coming. And I'm speaking specifically about hotel tech. So if you want to be acquired, get in touch. But seriously though, we see the evolution of our existing product offering being accelerated by the right strategic acquisitions, whether it's a geographic advantage by market share or product evolution. And that's a much more, I feel that's a much more interesting conversation, because then you actually can talk about super exciting things without having to convince the PMS to do this, convince the channel manager to do that, which is where we're living, the world we're living in today.
Yeah, and I get that. But do you think, I mean, back to the question, do you think, total profitability, I mean, all this, the acquisitions, whether you work for a small group or independent companies getting acquired, but will total profitability actually happen, or will it just be something being discussed again as it was in TRM? Anyone else want to? We have Neville, go on.
I mean, it will. Let's be positive. We still work in an industry that runs at 2 speeds. So you have people who are investing a lot in revenue management and have a lot of resources and move faster, and you have people who are still getting there. So the first group of people are moving towards total revenue management, total profitability within the next 5 to 10 years, for sure. Maybe that second group of people will take a bit longer, but as I said right at the beginning, I think that what's happened in the industry in the last year and a half is kind of making people see more clearly what they need to do, and maybe accelerating some decisions which would have taken longer otherwise. So I'm quite optimistic about this, and I have been quite pessimistic in the past, but I do think that there is a change in viewpoint amongst many hotel owners, hotel operators, towards really focusing on how revenue management can help you be more profitable. And this will lead on to things like total revenue management, total profitability in the future. It might take a bit longer in some cases, but I definitely think we're going to get there.
Okay, super, thank you. And I'm conscious, Klaus, you need to go in a couple of minutes, but so I've got a second question that I'd like to ask while I can grab your time. First, Alex, if I could just get your input onto the TRM conversation, and then I'll come straight to you, Klaus, with the second question.
I think the discussion needs to start somewhere, and we need to be able to offer it, and then you need the adoption of the market and so on. So I think it will take some years, actually. I mean, we need to take one step at a time. I think currently there are only less than 10% or so, whatever it is, using RMS, and I think we need to hit that point, tipping scale, sort of where the majority are starting, not the majority, but a big part of the market is starting to use RMS technology, and then this will follow, and there will be more focus on it, and so on. So this is part of the evolution of where we are heading overall. Without a doubt, we are heading there. The question, so it's very much depending on the adoption as well in the market.
Yeah. So we're going to get that. The question, I guess, like a lot of these, is when, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay. A follow-up question, and just I'll get Klaus's answer, and then Klaus will obviously say goodbye. If you can hang around for a couple of minutes, that would be wonderful. But I'm aware of it. One of the things I wanted to touch on, back to a comment Christian made earlier, but from a slightly different perspective around chicken and egg. Revenue management, is it leading the evolution of revenue of the RMS technology, or is RMS technology now leading the way that revenue management needs to respond? And are we seeing new roles developing within the revenue professionals? And I think, Jens, you referred to seeing a job description that had a very different style. But that, which are they working? Are revenue professionals, RMS, working in sync, or is one leading the other? And who is evolving? Who is evolving? Who wants to take that one on first? Klaus, sorry, I'm coming to you first.
Thank you. I can stay one or two more minutes, but just, I think it's both. We have instances where our clients are asking us, can we do more? Can we do quicker? Can we innovate faster? Can you do these things for us that we really want to get accomplished, together with our PMS and CRS vendors? So that's one scenario, and that's helping us understand kind of where should we focus our resources on. And then the other scenario, in many instances, we innovate and we develop and we bring new things to market that then the clients haven't even realized that they needed it until they have it in their hands. So it's both. The most important thing is being very close to our clients, being very close to the market, understanding the industry, understanding the long-term trends that are going to happen, and kind of understand how these trends are going to impact the industry, impact revenue management and pricing.
That makes a lot of sense. And Jens, do you want to just jump in on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. But you're comparing the industry, the operators to the tech vendors, and I think it might be helpful also just to kind of look at the level of innovation in each camp. I think thinking back to these 800 PMSs that I mentioned, there is a 10% segment of those which are the most innovative. Same on the RMS side. There's not only 5 to 10 RMSs in the world. There's tons of outsourcing agencies and small tech companies that we've seen who do very limited RM capability on the tech side. And similarly, on the hotel side, there are brands that are really pushing the envelope on innovation. And then there's the long tail of the single independents, and there's a chunk of the industry where very little has happened. So I think that's what we also need to look at. And we're seeing some big transformations accelerated by COVID, where the winners and the most innovative brands in the industry, they have invested in their tech stack. They have teams which are really accelerating innovation. They're looking at their business from these new metrics. They're thinking about profit per guest. They're thinking about square meter. They have multiple product categories. They're implementing memberships. You'll see these brands out in the industry, and they are the ones who are doing M&A. So our biggest customers have actually grown through this pandemic because they've had access to capital, and they've bought up these smaller brands and operators that aren't innovating. So I think that's the bigger chunk there, where in the industry, if you're in revenue management and a hospitality business, where do you sit? Are you an innovator, or will you be eaten up by the innovators?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good
I
point.
would like to comment on that.
Yeah, go for it, Alex.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with Jens, and we are living in a symbiosis with the market in one way, but we also need to push innovation to a large extent. And I think that we as a product vendor or RMS vendor, you always need to find that kind of we need to realize product market fit to a certain extent, and then the remaining percentage of what we can do is for innovation. It's difficult to be in innovation phase, because then we need to obviously stay in business. So it's a balance act, I would say. So I would say, but the majority is to respond and be close to market, respond to what the market needs. But then, as Klaus and Jens said, then we need to push the envelope and go our own ways and to innovate as well. And that's a nice balance act, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Neville, anything to add into that?
I mean, this conversation reminds me a bit about my conversation with Eric about KPIs. We have to be careful here. I do believe we have to innovate, but we have to be careful that we're actually meeting a need that hotel customers have. We shouldn't be defining this is where you need to go. We can help and we can push in that direction, and we can come up with ideas, but we can't just go developing products because that's the way we think things should be done, because that's a very dangerous road to go down. And I mean, Alex mentioned this just now as well. So it's a balancing act. And actually what we do in my company is we have an area we call Beyond Price Labs. And we actually work with some of our customers who are more innovative to help to develop new functionality where they can have an input and we can work together hand in hand. But developing functionalities on our own, I wouldn't be a big fan of that approach.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I know the last time we had Eric follow Neville. so over to you, Eric.
Okay, I've got my saucer of milk over here on the side. I'm nice and calm. Yeah, so you know what? I think in terms of the innovation piece, there's definitely, we speak about hotels, we speak about hoteliers as if they're one group, but they're really at least three types of hoteliers. The very basic ma and pa kettle kind of property, very simple, afraid of technology, not confident at all. Then we have let's say the mid-market, and they have some experience in technology. They're confident, but they're not, let's say, at an advanced level. Then you have the advanced hoteliers who are always looking to optimize every single piece of their business, automate everything that's possible. They understand tech and how it can improve the value of their asset. So when we speak about hotels or hoteliers, then really there are horses for courses. Now, having said that, from a supplier's perspective, we absolutely have, let's say, two tracks. So one track is build it, integrate it, and show it where it's quite obvious that there's value there, and we're almost educating the hotelier on, look what's possible. We've gone and built this. Now I'm talking about an intelligent investment because we're sister companies. Let's say we're working with 10 or 15 other companies. We're all in the same family. That's a much easier situation than trying to speak to another company where you might build something and it will not be accepted in the market. So I accept what Neville's talking about, but then again, there are smarter ways of doing this. On the other side, we have hotel groups. They tend to be groups, not single properties, but I'm talking about anywhere from 15 to let's say 80 property groups, where they've said, we've looked at X, Y, and Z RMS, and they can't do what we need over here, whatever it might be. So we talk about it with them, and if it's got legs, let's say, we'll have a proper workshop to really break down and analyze exactly what they mean, because sometimes the hotel will show you a spreadsheet and a report and say, that's what we need. You need to really understand every single cell, and etc. And then we can then go to let's say a joint development phase if that's the right way to go or not. So just the same way that I said there are different types of hoteliers, as suppliers, we need to have different approaches.
That's a perfect point. Great stuff. I'm very conscious. We knew that we were probably going to lose Klaus, and also Jens has had to drop off. So it seems an appropriate time to kind of wrap things up and offer our thanks to both of them, and to offer our thanks to Alexander, Neville, Eric. I really appreciate you joining us. For those of you guys taking part, thank you for giving up the time. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation, and not only just feeling like you're talking to viewers, but talking with like-minded peers and those in other technology solutions has been of value. I'm sure those that have been watching it have also gained a lot of value from it. So thank you so much for sharing your time and sharing your knowledge. Christian, great. Thanks so much for moderating it through. Really excellent job. So really appreciate you coming on board to do that. Also, obviously, a thank you to Libra for initiating this idea and getting it pulled together. Again, I mentioned them yesterday because they were pulling it together for the data science, but to Jennifer and to Stefano, who've been working in the back end, pulling all this together, getting the event organized, helping through the streaming. It's been brilliant, the work that they've done, and thank you so much for pulling that together. And also, I think, hopefully you found it of value, and please reach out. You can connect with us either at Revenue, at Libra, at Atomize, at Beyond Price, at Ideas, at Pace Revenue. We're there to answer the questions, whether it be direct about a solution, whether it's general about the way that things are evolving. We'll make sure that links are available so that you can connect with anybody that you want to connect with. And I'm sure we all have our own LinkedIn profiles, so we can all pick up a message where necessary. But in terms of just wrapping this all up, thanks so much to everyone who's taken part. Thanks so much for everyone who's been watching, and look forward to doing more of these again in the future. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.